Good morning. Good morning. You're with Jeff and Eric again, Courageous Conviction Media. Today we got some cool things to talk about. Jeff, a lot of stuff going on this week, huh? With the Tree of Life, the Rainbow Tree of Life coming out and supported by Deseret, which is a division. The church is owned by the church, and so there's a little bit of controversy on that. With Come Follow Me going in 2024. We've got some stuff you shared with me too about Joseph that we won't go into today, but just kind of talk in brief about a little bit. When we get this stuff, we get this information that's challenging to testimonies. And you even told me yourself you have some family members that have fallen away over some of this information. It's the first time I've heard this information. I don't know if it's new or newer. I'll let you elaborate a little bit on that. People, we talked last week about missionaries coming home and following from the church, and then the less actives in the chapels. There's so many on the members of the ward, but yet sacrament meeting is exciting if you get 120 out, 150.
Yeah.
That's good attendance. And that's pretty sad when you got 350, 500 people. We talked about that before, but you were talking too a little bit about stuff that's troubling. Why don't you jump with that? We were just talking before we start recording a little bit, and keep running with that. I think our audience would like to hear some of these thoughts.
What's troubling right now is that people are leaving the church, like what you said. But we did that, several years, a couple of decades ago. I left the church after my mission. It didn't take more than a couple of years, but which seems pretty quickly. At that time, I thought that things are different time-wise when you're into that. But yeah, the same thing, and you did too as well. You left the church 3 years, after you got home from your mission, and it's not like I didn't fulfill all my duties on my mission. 100%, I did, and I know you did too. And we got excited about the mission work that we did, and we're proud of it. One of the reasons I came back to church probably had a lot to do with that initial commitment to go and serve the Lord way back then. But in my latter years there, I became more hostile toward the church. I read and devoured every piece of anti-Mormon literature that I could get my hands on. I didn't want to go back to church right away because I wanted to confirm the fact that I was doing what I should be doing, But being angry toward the church led me into being an angry man. It didn't really help my marriage at all. It was very destructive. And there was a lot of changes I needed to make. And coming back to church helped me out. Now people are leaving. I think we need to keep our target here on those that are putting too much emphasis on their doubts. They trust their doubts. And, you can't do that if you expect to really be happy. If the plan of happiness is going to work, you've got to realize that there's going to be some things that are going to come to mind that are not spiritually beneficial. They can be if we work through them, but they won't be if you trust your doubts. And so you've got to be able to look at those doubts with, not maybe with a grain of salt. Just say, hey, I got to dig a little bit deeper. I had this guy send me on Facebook that was going back from and forth. It was like this Christian versus Mormons kind of thing. And I try not to read too much into that because there's some negativity there. And, but mostly, heavily sided against the LDS coming from these so-called Christians. And there's ex-Mormons that are on there, or people that have left the church. And some of them they consider themselves, kind of scholastic or academic, and they're not, but they think of themselves pretty highly. So he fires me all this stuff off about Joseph Smith. And at first I was taken back. I was like, okay, well, wow, can this be true? I'm like, I thought I'd read everything. But, once I really got into it, I started realizing that his accusations really didn't hold water. And I could see that his need to not believe in the church was greater than discovering the truth. And my need and your need, not to speak for you, but the way we've been talking here is Our needs are to just to discover the truth. I don't need anybody to blind me. I don't want to be a blind servant and realize that I'm making blind choices. No, I want to make good conscious choices, and I do. I follow the research. Sometimes it's tough stuff to read. It's not for everybody, but don't trust your doubts and
Yeah.
trust. Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Just don't trust your doubts. There's always more to it. And if you dig into it and try to find what it is that, because there's a lot of stuff out there now. I mean, information is out there. We're in that age that you can get anything. So if you're going to see some negative stuff, look at the positive stuff too, and then weigh them out. Don't just, read one book and go, oh, wow, I'm stuck on that. Well, that must not be true. Yeah, you're going to have to do some research. But research the positive stuff.
Yeah, and I agree with that, Jeff. And I think, even the church's counsel is that we don't spend a lot of time, or really, personally, I don't read things against the church.
Mm-hmm.
I will hear an explanation of somebody in the church defending something that was said about the church, right?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm talking. That's what I'm talking about, So, but like this guy, he sends me all this stuff, and I glanced at it, read it, and I'm like, well, that's, and let me see, and let me look at the other side of that story. So going back and finding who the author was, and then realizing that the author was actually pro LDS, and he was using that in a context that was going to be anti. Then I was, in fact, he was, it's Brian Hales, I think was his name, and he was a physician that had written some stuff about and really gotten into this nitty gritty stuff about Joseph Smith. But in the end, even Joseph Smith himself says, none of my revelations came from the devil. I think he was defending himself, and I'm ad-libbing there a little bit, but that's basically, what he was saying, Joseph Smith was saying, because he was being accused of a lot of different things. And,
but, Jeff, interjecting, I fall back to what Brigham said. And we were talking earlier about Brigham being more of a hardline prophet. And I was saying, boy, I wish we could use Brigham today. Right. Yeah. And I know that there's a reason that President Nelson was called at this time. Right. Yeah. And sometimes I wish that he was just a little more. I think right now we need that Ezra Taft Benson type of, or David O. McKay. Right. Yeah. A little more assertive. But I understand too, because we're trying to keep those temple doors open. And like we said before, the majority of the countries in the world today are either socialist or communist, right? Yeah. But we're dealing with a leftist leaning anti-religion type of governments, just in that they're in that progressive stage of eliminating religion. And that's being actually worked on more so. And it's funny because listening to Greg with Quick Radio last night, I just was pulled out and kind of just sat down and stayed up till like midnight listening, because he hit a home run, and bringing on an individual as an expert on Lenin Marxism, right? And the cultural division and the cultural Marxism that existed during the early days of Russia with Lenin, and Stalin took it to another level, right? And so forth. And the gulags, and if you violated those, and how they basically took control of religion. And what they did is they divided from within. It was interesting because this individual who focused her master's degree in this type of politics, of how the deception of a nation takes place, implementing these agendas, moving towards the Marxist goals, right? Yeah, exactly.
Small little bits,
And that's why it's called progressive. Mm-hmm. It's very progressive, and it's just a little bit. Now, she said something though, that back in the 1950s, I'm lying, 1930s, that the communist movement was to penetrate all major infrastructure, including major religions in America, right? Yeah, and in the world. But in America specifically, you're talking about. And she said that the churches, and she was not a member, she was on the member show, and she was just an expert in her field. And she said every church has been penetrated. Mm-hmm. And that includes the Church of Christ of Latter-day Saints. And we're going to see that. You're going to see the controversy coming out right now this week with the whole rainbow flag, with this adoption, it's like a little book for notes and so forth that's being sold by Deseret. And the base of this is a tree of life. This is Lehi's dream. This big, it's thrown into this whole culture war now in the church. And this is Deseret. Right. So people are going to have a problem with that,
Well, they should have a problem with it. I mean, the thing is that where do we draw the line? I mean, obviously we don't want to exclude our, gay brothers and sisters, and we want them to be able to stay in the church, and there has been a path.
Right. But Jeff, wait.
But I'm only saying this because now we've crossed that line, and the tree of life and the rainbow flag, I don't think they should be on the same page. And it's not because of bigotry; it's just because are we promoting being gay? I mean, is that what we're trying to do here? Because it seems that way, and it's going to seem that way to a lot of members of the church.
It looks like it's okay. Yeah, it looks like it's okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
So I think that it's dangerous territory. I mean, if you really look at statistics, I mean, even Bill Maher, a long time ago, or a couple of years ago, it's like, back in the 50s, there was, this percentage of gays in America. And then back in the 60s, it got a little bit bigger. And then the 70s got a little bit bigger, in the 80s and 90s. And now where we're at is, by the year, 2040, 90% of the population is going to be gay. I'm like, well, is it a fad or is it an actual thing? So kind of thinking things are kind of leaning toward the fad idea. So it's being popularized. And that's where the problem is.
Well, there's only 2% of the world's population now. And this is where they calculate. This is a number I read maybe it's been about a year and a half, 2 years ago, right? So maybe let's say it's increased some because it's been being promoted. But their qualification of being gay is if you've ever thought a gay thought, right? Or acted on it, right? Then you're gay. And that's what they're coming out and saying. It's like, we've had a friend that's come out recently and, he's never acted on it, but he says, hey, and we talked about it yesterday, and he's acknowledging that he's gay. But I think that's more so too, because that's just trying to make everybody more inclusive. So it seems like it's bigger than what it is, but not even 2% of the world practices these practices, right? And these are practices that are major sins. Remember, our founding fathers, sodomy, the idea of sodomy, that was a capital offense to our founding fathers, right? Yeah. And somehow it's gone from a capital offense to it's supposed to be the norm. What is absolutely outside of the law, the natural law, and that's where I think we were talking a little bit earlier about getting back to natural law and understanding that, and why we want to talk about Section 88 is because the more we can understand, the better we can make choices. Now, I'm not stepping back and saying, okay, that they are not Heavenly Father's children, that they're very confused, they need help. Sure, I understand all that. But there's also, there's a point where the Lamanites needed help and you had missionary work. But then there was a point where they got to the point where there was just their intentions, Lamanites' intentions were so evil that Alma just, in his dream team, they just packed it up and came home. And shortly after that, we roll into the war chapters, right? Yeah. And we're at that point, I feel, that, the missionary efforts out there are going to be packed up and go home, back to your safety zone. In other words, back to that fortress. And I think you're going to start seeing more drastic things take place. Now, with that being said, I want to back up a little bit, though, and go back to we're talking about members having challenges and falling away. Boy, if they think they've had challenges now, the challenges coming, Jeff, are going to be even greater with blockchain coming out, right? And the whole metaverse idea. And this is a real thing. Zuckerberg is going to do this. He hasn't invested these billions of dollars in basically tanking his company because he doesn't think that blockchain and meta is the future, right? Then the metaverse is very different than meta. Now, just for our listeners to understand that, it's trying to make it look like Facebook, Meta, right? Instagram, or they are the metaverse. He's trying to make it look like that. That's not true. The metaverse is huge. It's universal. They're just grabbing a little section of it. I even bought real estate already in the metaverse, and it's already gone up in value.
Right.
You know, I bought markets and so forth that I plan on rebuilding. We bought a little bit of land in Las Vegas too. We're going to plan on rebuilding there too, a little hotel type of thing. But you know, it's a whole different world that's coming. Now, listen to this. Backing up, let's go back a little bit to where people having problems leaving. We go back to, you know, we just need to understand the people. I try to say this in a very loving way, but it's the truth. Our leaders in the church do not have crystal balls. These men do the best they can do with what they understand. Now, many of us feel, and that's my feelings on it, not yours, but my feelings are, I feel that President Nelson is a little bit of opinionated, and that I think he's a little soft on certain things, right? But that's necessary right now.
Yeah.
He's the one, and I'm not the one calling the shots.
Well, we got to keep the body of the,
Yeah,
we got to keep the body of the church. I mean, not just the temple doors need to be open, but we have, I mean, both of us live in, let's face it, we both live in blue states. So, you know, and I love, you know, the members of our congregation. You know, I sometimes I do an eye roll when I hear things because, you know, red, you know, minded people seem to get called out all the time for being political, but I wonder if sometimes the other side is very political as well. And it just, you know, but for the sake of keeping the congregation, we've only got 100 people going to church, or 150. And there's a, you know, a congregation of 500. Well, we don't want to lose another 50, you know, I mean, and why?
And in divided people, states, you know? Yeah. In blue states, you're going to lose that too, because it's just we're so divided right now on these issues that they're polar. It's like it's going to be very difficult to build that bridge back. It's very divisive now. One's a Marxist agenda. What's that?
We got to do it though. I mean, there is a Marxist agenda out there. I'm not for it at all. I think people need to wake up and see, you know, the real light. And people have become so anti, you know, red in some, you know, areas of this country that they can't really see what's really going on. And some red has become so anti-blue, you know, that there's no peace, you know. So, and if we can't be open to dialogue, and I don't mean dialogue, let's decide which party is right, because I'm over that. I think what we have to do is think about the church and what's right with our callings and how we serve others and how we, you know, maintain, or not just maintain, but how we grow, you know, as church members, and not just keep our membership at 150. Let's get it to go to 200 and then 250.
Well, and I think you just said something. You know, the red and the blue are not going to have dialogue. It's too polar.
Right.
There is no common ground there. What's happening right now, this is Marxism versus freedom. This has been the battle. This is the battle of the pre-existence. It's the same battle. Okay. And people need to understand this is the same ideologies that we dealt with in the pre-existence, which Father basically said, no more. And he cast it all out. Right. So, but what I want to get back to is our leaders are going to make mistakes along this road. It's getting very, very tricky. And, you know, it's not like the prophet is tuned into this like constant filter of this ticker that comes across, you know, hey, you know, over in Japan, you're going to have this rise up. So warn the people. It doesn't work that way. They're here to fulfill their measures as well. They have to daily be in tune with the Spirit. If the president's having a bad day, you know, the Spirit's not going to be as close to him. It's just like with us, right? Now, I do want to say this, though. When Joseph, you know, and they're going to make mistakes, and that's what's coming out right now. So we're talking about Joseph. And maybe Joseph did make some mistakes in what we were talking about. I want to go into that. I think it's something we can dig into, because here I want to dig into hard things that people don't really want to talk. And Quick Radio is doing the same thing now, which is really interesting, because it was more just, hey, you know, how can we better the elders' quorum? We need to get more masculinity back into, you know, our priesthood and so forth. And becoming that Barbie's kin type of a man that's just there to, you know, subservient type. And so he talks about those things of what that role is as a male, as a heavenly father, as a male as well, and those characteristics that come with being a male as well as a woman. But we've been focused on the women for a long time, and we forgot about the men. And elders' quorum's waning, as we were talking about earlier. It's really kind of, I found it to be weaker than it was in the past. But what I want to say is this: Joseph Smith, remember the whole Kirtland Society, the bank issue, right?
Yeah.
And many felt that was prophecy. We know now that that was just Joseph's desire, right? And that was something that he wanted. And there was a lot of falling away. In fact, 6 apostles and both of his counselors in the first presidency left the church over that. They got in a fist fight in the temple, right? And Joseph basically fell into such a depression that he almost died. He got really sick.
Yeah.
But did that make Joseph not the prophet of this dispensation? Absolutely not. And going back to what we talked about, hey, I'm okay seeing the man imperfect because I'm imperfect. And, the only perfect being that walked this earth and perfect in the way he did not sin. I'm sure he fell down and scratched his knee and he had to learn through little scuffs with the kids as you grow up, was our Savior, right? Yeah. But he learned those processes as we are. Mm-hmm. People leave in the church, Jeff, what took place in that Curtin temple, and I don't remember the guy's name exactly. It's on the tip of my tongue, but he says to Brigham, he says, let me tell you something about Joseph not being a prophet anymore. And I'll tell you things. And Brigham's famous line, don't tell me, because what I know.
Right.
And I don't need to hear anything else. Right.
I think that's good. Don't tell me, because what I know is what I know. I mean, and if you do tell me, I'm going to find a way to understand it, because we are human and we do make mistakes. Even Russell M. Nelson is going to make his own mistakes. I don't think it's on a level of you and I.
No, clearly not.
But, and so, I think he deserves to be followed, because not only does he deserve that, but we're kind of, pointedly directed in that to follow the prophet, right? We even have that song. And, it pisses off all the, mainstream Christians. I call them the Nicene Christians, that, they're the ones that adopted, Christianity 400 years after Christ, or 500. But yeah, they would like to think that we worship the prophet, and that's not the case. But we shouldn't worship the prophet, and maybe there are some members that take too many things, back with COVID and all that stuff that happened. And there's going to be some other decisions that we'll have to make, that we should keep our agency intact, that there's always that part that the church is always going to promote agency as any, it's part of the gospel. Agency is the gospel of Jesus Christ. And, that cannot be excluded from the gospel. That would be impossible for it to be the true gospel of Christ.
Please, subscribe below. It's free. Hit that button down below, subscribe, give us a thumbs up, send this out to your friends. It's our new podcast. Jeff and I have these experiences that we've lived outside the country many years of our lives.